So we also have now a great tsunami related question from Shirley. So she asks, how will sea level rise affect our tsunami maps, and is there a plan to update them? So William, this is your area. What are your thoughts on the relationship between sea level rise, tsunamis, and public information? And perhaps Tom as well, with your role at NEMA, the National Emergency Management Agency, is there a plan to update our tsunami maps?
Okay, so sea level rise certainly can affect how far a tsunami can travel inland. It's sort of raising the background level, and as we have higher sea levels, we can expect tsunamis to travel, to extend a bit further inland. In terms of our maps, it's worth making a distinction here between tsunami evacuation maps and tsunami hazard or land use planning maps. So for tsunami evacuation maps, we're thinking about maps that maybe we'd expect to be, well, prepared to be used in the next 10 to 20 years or so. So we'd only expect a few centimeters of sea level rise over that period. So they're generally developed using current sea levels. Whereas if we're doing land use planning, then we might be thinking about buildings or other infrastructure that we want to be there for 50 or 100 years. And for that kind of work, we would look at different assumptions of sea level rise over that time. Now, because the amount of sea level rise in the next century is not necessarily very well known, we'd usually do a few different levels of sea level rise and compare what the different maps look like and discuss that with the councils who are using it for land use planning. And I'll pass to Tom for the second question.
I thought you're doing a great job, William. Feel free to carry on. So I checked with my National Emergency Management Agency or NEMA colleagues about this, and as William said, with evacuation maps, a lot of the work that's been done to date is probably pretty good for at least in the short term, where we're unlikely to see dramatic sea level change. So the modelling probably holds pretty well, and the current maps that we have are pretty good. But as with everything, our understanding continues to change and get better through time as we better science and better understanding of what occurs. So the way that New Zealand updates it or does its tsunami evacuation maps is that each of the civil defence and emergency management groups around the country are responsible for their own mapping exercises and working and managing their own risks. So NEMA, as the central government agency for this, provides guidance around appropriate ways to do this and recommendations for hopefully nationally consistent approaches. But each of the groups have the autonomy to decide what's best for them. So one of the things that you can do as an individual is engage with that process. When the groups are updating their tsunami evacuation zone maps or what they're looking at in terms of how to participate in some of that decision making with where evacuation routes might be and what's important to ensure you've got good evacuation pathways and so on, is get in touch with your CDM organisations or offices and participate in that process. And the Bay of Plenty is a really great exemplar of that, where they've got a very people-centric approach to how they're approaching this this challenge. Probably just a final thing to say is it's certainly sea level rise and climate change in general is a massive priority for central government, and there's a huge amount of work that's going on in this space, and it's this is one of the great examples where climate-related hazards and challenges really interface with all of the natural hazards that we deal with here in New Zealand. So like tsunami and earthquake and even volcano, managed to weave that in. It's all that multi-hazard interrelated picture is really important when we're thinking about managing our risks. So that's very much front of mind for all of our civil defence and emergency management organisations around the country.